These aren't just Hollywood's toughest actors, they were real-life warriors. Men who didn't just act like heroes on screen, they were heroes off it. The kind who could drop a man with one punch, then casually return to filming like it was just another day. From battle-hardened soldiers to underground fighters and even decorated war legends, their stories are the stuff of legends. One actor, number 2 on our list, had a past so dark, studios worked overtime to bury it. And topping the list? The unforgettable Audie Murphy. A real-life war hero whose courage on the battlefield made anything he did on camera look tame. Think you know his story? Let's take a closer look. Before Charles Bronson became Hollywood's ultimate tough guy, he lived a life so brutal it would have broken most men. Born Charles Buczynski, he grew up dirt poor in a Pennsylvania coal mining town, one of 15 children in a family that barely scraped by. By the age of 10, he was already deep in the mines, toiling in choking darkness while other kids played in the sun. Those early years shaped him. "I connect with those roles," he once said, "because I lived that kind of life, violence, death, hunger. That was my reality." His face told the story, chiseled, weathered, eyes heavy with memory. That famous scowl? It wasn't an act, it was survival written across his skin. Bronson's hardest test came in World War II, flying 25 bombing missions over Japan as a B-29 gunner. He was wounded in action and awarded the Purple Heart. After the war, he drifted through more than 50 jobs, janitor, bricklayer, even a chicken plucker, before landing in front of the camera. When he fought on screen, it wasn't choreographed polish, it was raw, lived-in truth. Every punch, every stare, came from a place that knew real pain. And that's what set Bronson apart. He didn't just play the tough guy, he was him, forged by poverty, war, and survival. Audie Murphy. The name might not evoke the swagger of John Wayne or the grit of Clint Eastwood, but behind that boyish face and modest 5 feet 5 inches frame was the deadliest man to ever grace a Hollywood set. Before the cameras rolled, Murphy was a real-life war hero, the most decorated U.S. soldier of World War II. At just 19, he stood alone on a burning tank destroyer in France, holding off an entire German company for over an hour. Wounded, out of ammo, and surrounded, he still led a counterattack that turned the tide, an act of sheer bravery that earned him the Medal of Honor. And that was only one chapter in his astonishing story. By the time he was 21, Murphy had collected every American Combat Award for valor, along with 5 foreign medals, 28 in total. His kill count was estimated at nearly 300, more than some entire platoons. When Life magazine featured him on its cover, Hollywood came calling. But casting directors were hesitant. How could someone so gentle-looking portray the warrior he truly was? Into Hell and Back, Murphy played himself, though even that film watered down his real-life heroism. Off-screen, he battled invisible wounds, PTSD that haunted him for years. And yet, despite everything he endured, he avoided tough guy roles, preferring softer characters. Because Audie Murphy didn't need to act brave. He already was. Kirk Douglas, born Isidore Izzy Dembski to impoverished Jewish immigrants, rose from nothing with nothing but pure grit. Growing up in a household so poor they often skipped meals, young Kirk learned survival early, hustling by selling snacks to local factory workers just to scrape by. But behind that hungry boy was an unbreakable will. He wrestled his way into college, literally, earning a scholarship to St. Lawrence University through sheer physical skill, not staged spectacle. His greatest test came not on the screen, but during World War II, when he served as a communications officer aboard a Navy submarine chaser. Life in those cramped quarters was brutal, and the injuries he sustained forced an early discharge. But pain never stopped Kirk Douglas. It only made him push harder. On the set of Spartacus, he trained with real fighters, insisted on doing his own dangerous stunts, and returned to work just days after serious injuries. Even in his later years, Douglas defied the odds, surviving a deadly helicopter crash and reclaiming his speech after a devastating stroke. Through every battle, on screen and off, he proved his greatest strength wasn't his body, it was his unstoppable spirit. Marvin didn't just play the tough guy, he was the tough guy. Long before the bright lights of Hollywood, Marvin served as a Marine in World War II, battling through the unforgiving hell of the Pacific. As a member of the 4th Marine Division, he saw action in the brutal Battle of Saipan in 1944, where he was torn up by machine gun fire that shattered his sciatic nerve. The injury left him with a limp he carried for the rest of his life, though he masked it on screen with sheer grit. For his valor, he was awarded the Purple Heart. But unlike many who romanticized war, Marvin told it straight. "I got shot in the ass and sent home," he once said. No sugarcoating. No hero act. Just raw, unfiltered truth. That brutal honesty bled into every role he played. Director John Boorman, who worked with him on Point Blank, said Marvin didn't need to fake toughness, he had lived it. From the Dirty Dozen to The Killers, his performances didn't feel acted. They felt real. And off-camera, he was just as fierce. In one wild incident, Marvin reportedly took on a group of lumberjacks in a bar fight, and still showed up to set the next morning, bruised but unfazed. Beneath the bruiser persona was a sharp mind. He was known to quote Shakespeare between takes. Lee Marvin didn't have to become a legend. He already was one, the kind carved from war, whiskey, and raw willpower. Steve McQueen wasn't just Hollywood's king of cool, he was the embodiment of raw grit and fearless rebellion. While other actors hid behind stunt doubles and polished PR images, McQueen lived dangerously by choice. He didn't just play the tough guy, he was the tough guy. His story began in chaos. Raised in neglect and bouncing through a troubled youth, McQueen ran away by 14 and soon found himself in the U.S. Marine Corps. He was rebellious, often punished, but redemption came during an Arctic mission where he saved 5 fellow Marines after their tank plunged through ice. That moment of real heroism hinted at the man he was becoming. Before the silver screen, McQueen worked rough jobs, oil rigs, carnival grounds, anything to survive. But when fame came, it didn't tame him. He was a speed junkie, a thrill seeker who entered car and motorcycle races under fake names just to outrun the studio's grip. In The Great Escape, it wasn't a stuntman. It was McQueen flying over barbed wire on a bike. In the grueling 12 Hours of Sebring, he finished second, with a cast on his foot. Even Hollywood couldn't box him in. From the sand pebbles to the towering inferno, he tackled high-risk scenes himself, refusing to let fear call the shots. And when he learned he was on Charles Manson's hit list, he didn't panic. He packed a gun and kept going. Steve McQueen didn't pretend to be a legend. He lived like one. Anthony Quinn's commanding presence on screen wasn't born in drama class. It was forged in fire, sweat, and survival. Born in Chihuahua, Mexico, during the chaos of the Mexican Revolution, Quinn's earliest memories were filled with gunfire, fleeing soldiers, and his family's desperate escape to safety. When they arrived in Los Angeles, they didn't land in luxury, they were dropped into the city's toughest neighborhoods. And by age 10, Anthony was already working to keep the lights on. While other actors sculpted their bodies in high-end gyms, Quinn's strength was built the old-fashioned way, with blistered hands and aching muscles. He worked as a butcher's apprentice, hauled bricks on construction sites, and stepped into the boxing ring as a teenager, not for fame, but to put food on the table. His nose, famously crooked, wasn't a Hollywood quirk, it was earned in the ring, the mark of a real fighter. Nothing about Anthony Quinn was staged. His grit came from the trenches of real life. On the set of Zorba the Greek, when a scene called for hauling heavy logs, a job meant for 2 men, Quinn did it solo, stunning the crew and earning the awe of even hardened Greek laborers. Director Elia Kazan, who worked with him on Viva Zapata, said it best. Tony doesn't act tough, he is tough. That strength doesn't come from weight rooms. It comes from life. Even in his 50s and 60s, Quinn ignored body doubles and took on dangerous stunts himself, terrifying producers but thrilling audiences. At 46, during the filming of The Guns of Navarone, he scaled a cliff himself. No tricks, no stand-ins. What made Anthony Quinn different from Hollywood's manufactured tough guys was his quiet confidence. He didn't need to fake machismo. He could cry on screen, show vulnerability, and wear emotion with pride. As Sophia Loren once said, Anthony had the strength of a warrior and the soul of a poet. That rare combination made him unforgettable, both on screen and in life. James Cagney wasn't just a tough guy on screen. He was the real deal. Long before he rose to fame playing sharp-tongued gangsters and street-smart anti-heroes, Cagney had already forged his fighting spirit on the unforgiving streets of Manhattan's Lower East Side. In a neighborhood ruled by gangs, survival wasn't a game, it was a daily battle. Small in stature but fierce in will, young Jimmy turned to boxing not for glory, but to stay on his feet. He honed lightning-fast footwork and razor-precise fists in real street scraps, not choreographed fights. That raw intensity bled into his film work, giving his action scenes an edge no camera trick could fake. While other actors mimed punches, Cagney threw them like he meant it, because he did. Director Raoul Walsh, who worked with him on White Heat, once said, "Jimmy threw a punch better than any actor I ever directed, because he'd thrown plenty of real ones." But there was more to him than brute strength. Cagney was also a trained dancer, and it showed. His every move on screen carried a grace that elevated his fight scenes, fluid, forceful, and unforgettable. That physicality wasn't just for show. During the filming of The Public Enemy, actress Mae Clarke was caught off guard when Cagney famously smashed a grapefruit in her face, unscripted and shockingly real. It left her slightly injured and stunned, just like many of his co-stars who weren't ready for his realism. Off-screen, his reputation was just as formidable. Hollywood insiders knew, Cagney didn't talk tough, he was tough. Bob Hope once joked, "If you messed with Jimmy, he'd knock you down, then help you back up." Still, Cagney never boasted. In a rare 1973 interview, he reflected quietly, "When you grow up my size, where I did, you either learn to fight, or you spend a lot of time on the ground. I chose to stay on my feet." And that's exactly what he did, on the streets, on the screen, and in history. John Wayne, the man behind the legend. John Wayne's rugged persona wasn't just Hollywood myth, it was forged in sweat, grit, and the unrelenting hardships of a frontier boyhood. Before the world knew him as the Duke, Marion Morrison was just a tall, strapping kid growing up in the unforgiving landscapes of early 1900s Iowa and California, where backbreaking labor was part of daily life. Standing 6 feet 4 inches with the build of a natural athlete, Wayne first turned heads on the football field, earning a scholarship to the University of Southern California. But before the bright lights found him, he paid his dues behind the scenes, hauling heavy props, wrangling animals, and doing stunts others wouldn't dare attempt. Even after becoming a household name, Wayne kept doing his own stunt work, well into middle age. On the set of The Alamo, he fractured his ribs during a brutal horse fall. Most actors would have paused production. Wayne just had them tape him up and kept going, directing and acting through the pain. Legendary director John Ford once said, "Duke's toughness wasn't an act. I watched him grind through 14-hour days in scorching desert heat while others were collapsing." One of the darkest chapters came during the filming of The Conqueror in 1956, near a nuclear test site in Utah. Of the 220 cast and crew, 91 later developed cancer, including Wayne, who eventually died of stomach cancer in 1979. But he never slowed down. On the set of The Greatest Story Ever Told, he tore shoulder ligaments in a stunt and refused to halt production. Fellow actor Max von Sydow remembered, he had it wrapped up during lunch and was back in front of the camera by afternoon. Perhaps the most jaw-dropping moment of all? In 1964, after having a lung and several ribs removed due to cancer, Wayne returned to filming The Sons of Katie Elder just months later, still insisting on doing his own stunts. When director Henry Hathaway suggested a double, Wayne growled, "Either I do the stunts, or you find someone else." That was the end of that. Love him or hate him for his politics, even his harshest critics couldn't deny one thing. John Wayne was as tough in real life as the fearless heroes he brought to life on screen. Thanks for watching. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more legends and truths behind Hollywood's greatest icons. We'll see you in the next one.